I am in this session chairing this together with Professor Youquin. We also have Professor Cole Short, and we have Dr. Brian Jenkin, all together to talk about valuism, what it means, what it is, and how we actually can move forward with this idea. So what I'd like to do is first actually give you an introduction, and then we'll turn over to Youquin to talk about the math. Then we'll switch over to Brian to talk about valuism in context, and then Cole to take a little bit of a counter view to sort of challenge this and help us think about where we might be missing. So I will start off with my presentation. Okay, and this should be working. And again, I apologize, there is no translation for this presentation, but we will get translation working afterwards in the next session. So you've heard a lot about valuism, what it is or what it is we're aiming to do. So what I'd like to do is start to get a definition that will actually help us or help guide our discussions going forward. So have you heard of this term, Umwelten? It's a great word. And basically, this is from the studies of other living beings. And basically, the idea that we experience the world based on our sense perceptions. So like dolphins will use echolocation. Even though we're next to a dolphin in the water, we may hear a little bit, but we won't experience the water in the same way as a dolphin does. Even though we're in the same place, our sense perceptions, our Umwelten, our ability to understand the world is different fundamentally. So it means that the world is different for us based on the sense perceptions that we have, right? So elephants can hear sounds that humans can't hear. That we can't hear the sounds doesn't mean that the sounds don't exist, right? It means that we don't have the mechanism to actually sense them. So anyway, I can go through example by example, the nice little cartoons, but the basic idea is there's already an idea out there about how sense perceptions influence how we experience and interact with the world. And so when we think about a company, I'm sorry, I had technological enhancement. We are finding ways to enhance our perceptions. So implants into brains to be able to sense things for blind people, right? That can actually start to see again or sense things. Humans are incredibly good at enhancing our existing Umwelten to actually be able to experience more. So my analogy is when I was a kid, I had a black and white TV. I knew that around me, the world was in Technicolor, right? But my world through the television was black and white, right? And so black and white misses a lot of things. It shows some things, but it misses. So that Umwelten of that television media experience is just fundamentally different. So value exists in areas that haven't been measured, like impacts on communities. We're starting to see lawsuits, companies hurting their communities because those were externalities. We heard Sasha talk about that yesterday. It's just not out of our scope. We don't pay attention to it. The environment, we hear a lot about employees, other stakeholders. So again, because we're not measuring things, doesn't mean that impact doesn't happen. And so this is a fundamental point for me when we think about valuism, is to understand this. And this is very good company to be sharing, but talking about other ideas, so capitalism, Adam Smith, focusing on the actual power of the market, right? So the market efficiency and capital growth, Marx on social issues, Milton Friedman really helping us to focus on shareholder value. So these are different ways of looking at business in the world. They're just different approaches. And when we work inside of these systems, we collect different information. So each of them sees some part of economic activity, but they also miss many parts of economic activity too, which is why we're in the situation, some people very excited, some people feeling very dark right now, is that we just don't have the system to see. We also heard yesterday the idea that 56% of the world's companies that are 200 years or older are from Japan. And the question is why? How can these companies be so sustainable? There's obviously many reasons, but one is that there's a respect for stakeholders, right? An ongoing respect for stakeholders. So basically, what we're going to be talking about is this idea of expanding the ability for us to see using things like AI, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, those types of things to capture data, and then to use that in a way that we can actually see collectively what's happening. So when we talk about value and sustainability, those words exist, and James, I completely agree with your point, but we don't have a system yet where everybody can say, ah, that's value, that's what this means, ah, I can understand it and see it. So I'm going to take you into quantum mechanics for 30 seconds, but basically imagine that in any relationship, we can have any possible value outcome, from ultimate bad to ultimate good. All of those possibilities exist. It's possible that all of us start fighting each other like right now, and it's also possible that everyone starts hugging each other, and maybe everything in between. That's all possible, but then we bring that down to the actual lived experience that we're actually experiencing right now. But that's our choice, collectively in a relationship. So based on that possibility of value and what we choose, again, we heard a little bit about it yesterday, this mindset is critical. And so Yoshida was talking about Seiryoku Zen or Chita Kyoe. If both people enter that relationship trying to create ultimate value, that's great. And I've created kind of a joke word that this is my first time airing it out, so please excuse me. But Seiryoku Zen yo Jita Kyoe means all of our best energy for good things, for mutual prosperity. This says Seiryoku Akuyo Jiji Kyoe, which means all of my energy for bad things so that only I prosper. Okay? And we've heard some names raised yesterday. We've heard some different political views raised yesterday. But if we don't understand that there's a range from people wanting to do good for others to wanting to only do good for themselves in relationship, then we can't make a system that accounts for all of this. The system itself breaks. So we just have to understand that these mindsets exist. And so basically, if we can measure explain the potential value that we can create in relationship, plus what's experienced. We can do it for just one, two actor pair, like two people, a company and a customer. And we can do it for every pair like that. So a company and all of its customers, a company and all of its employees. And if we can do it for all of those stakeholders for one company, we can do it for all companies in an industry, in a market, and globally. We actually can measure value. So this is quite theoretical. I'm explaining valuism, not the practical application, but I want you to think about what we could do with blockchain, distributed ledger technology, if every impact is collected passively through blockchain or distributed ledger technology. If all of that data is actually actioned on with an AI dashboard or inference engine or whatever, we actually can start to see value in real time. And I believe that's where we're going. And the systems that we're developing right now are getting us there. So we'll show some baby steps towards this on the 11th of September. So we have Jenny and Dion here. We've now done our first application of the value model, which is a way to measure that actual value impact of companies over 2 years to see how companies behave over time. And again, once we get AI and blockchain happening, I think we're going to be able to see in more detail. So this is the general idea. And what I'd actually like to do is turn it over to Youquin to actually explain a little bit more about the mathematics underneath this. Done that correctly.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Before I begin, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay. And another thing is that I would like to share the content of my presentation. Short presentation though. Shall I use the share screen?
Yes, please. And if you
Okay.
can't,
Okay. I will do that. Thank you. Share. Okay. I hope everyone can see what I shared.
yes, perfectly.
Okay. All good. So yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Youquin. I'm from Western Sydney University in Sydney, Australia. I'm from School of Business. I'm currently working with Philip in regards to build up the mathematical framework to gauge the main feature and main arguments of valuism. I would like to use these 10 minutes to briefly present the basics of this mathematical framework for ethical value through relationships, as outlined by Philip just now. So I'll focus on the mathematics of valuism. My goal is to show how valuism can be operationalized in a rigorous way so that the value, which is normally invisible and subjective, becomes measurable, comparable, and ethically grounded. So I'll scroll down the document, which is not very long. I hope you can follow. Yeah. I try to make you feel comfortable to follow. So first point I would like to share is the why question. Why mathematics? So by valuism, we mean we begin valuism with the insights that the value is relational. It's not a static number. It's not a simply financial thing. But it's something that emerges through interaction. To move from philosophy to practice, we need a mathematical framework to operationalize the model. This allows us to answer the three questions that we hope to answer. The first is how much value was realized. Second is how efficiently was potential realized. And third, and was the outcome ethically legitimate? So that's the three key questions that we try to address. And then we go to the next part, which is relational value and efficiency. How we gonna calculate it? So let's start with the relationship between two actors, say A and B, at a point in time T. On the slides, you see the formula. You see the formula here. This is a formula, and so this means that the relational value is simply the sum of the outcomes for each actor, and it can be positive if both benefits, or if negative if harm is created. So next, we define the maximum potential value under those same conditions. On the slide, you will see the potential and of relation at the time t. You do not need to focus on the notation. The idea is quite straightforward, I would say, and potential value is the ethically achievable upper ground given relational and structural constraints. And finally, we have this formula indicated the efficiency, which we call eta, is defined as defined by this formula. Efficiency equals realized value divided by potential value. It ranges from a -1 to +1, telling us how well the relationship achieved what it could have. So that's the second part. The third part we want to present is ethical weighting. with fuzzy moral functions, moral desirability and the weighted value. But the efficiency alone is not enough. We also need to consider ethics. We also need to consider ethics. On the slides, you see a moral desirability function here. This function represents how ethically legitimate an outcome is. For example, an exponential penalty function can downgrade harmful results, even if they generate some nominal benefits. The ethically weighted value for an actor is then presented in this formula. That is realized value multiplied by its ethical desirability. And the total for a relationship is then presented in this formula. That's the third part. So overall, this third part ensures harmful outcomes are not masked inside efficiency scores. So then comes the fourth part, action under uncertainty, which is also can be called as dynamics and stakeholders. Valuism is not only static, it evolves over time, and efficiency can be tracked across multiple time periods, building a cumulative view of value creation and destruction. At the organizational level, we extend this to multiple stakeholders. On the slide, you see a stakeholder vector, customers, employees, partners, nature, society, and shareholders, and etc. So firm level efficiency is then calculated. Excuse me. So in words, it's simply the sum of realized stakeholder values divided by the sum of their potential values. And at the highest level, we can aggregate across firms and time periods to form a global valuism index, capturing worldwide value creation and destruction, and etc. So the fifth part, so why it matters. So this framework, I think, due to the time constraints, we'll quickly wrap up why it matters. This framework, we think, matters because it makes an invisible value visible. It distinguished between potential and realized outcomes, and it integrates ethics mathematically, avoiding binary judgments, and it allows comparability across individuals, organizations, and systems. So in short words, valuism gains rigor and decision relevance when expressed mathematically. So to conclude, the mathematics of valuism provides a structured way to evaluate the efficiency and ethical desirability across relationships. This connects directly with a philosophical grounding that Brian will discuss and AI perspectives that Cole will present. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Youquin. So we will move. Yeah, it's okay. Fantastic. So let's move over next to Brian. So just also spotlight you. So Brian. There you are, Brian. Hi, good morning, good evening.
Great. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Excellent. Is my screen showing up?
Perfect. Perfectly.
Great. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Youquin. I'm just going to jump right into it. We've now learned a bit about valuism, its conceptual theoretical foundations, and even the mathematics behind measuring value as it emerges in dynamic interactions and evolving relationships. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is to take a step back and introduce some philosophical terms that may help situate valuism within philosophy and within value theory more broadly. My hope is that this very brief and incomplete overview highlights some terms and questions that need to be clarified as a common language around value and around valuism is developed moving forward. Now then, what is value? This is one of the core questions, if not the driving question of this conference. It is also an inherently philosophical question, a question that thinkers from antiquity to the present day have grappled with, as we see across the speakers yesterday and today. Most branches of philosophy address questions of value. Think of ethics focus on justice, aesthetics focus on beauty, or epistemology's focus on truth. But there is a branch of philosophy devoted to the study of value in all of its dimensions, and that's known as value theory or axiology. Axios being the Greek term for that which is worthy, deserving, or fitting. There are two central distinctions within axiology important to our discussion here. The first is that between intrinsic and instrumental value. Something has intrinsic value if it is good in itself, independent of external consequences. The second is that between subjective and objective value. Are values real features of the world like mass or gravity? That would be objectivism. Or do they depend entirely on human attitudes, which would be the subjectivist position? And of course, cutting across these two distinctions is an important question I like to highlight here. How do value and values relate to human experience? These questions are not purely philosophical. They are not simply mental exercises or thought experiments. They have real-world impacts. Axiology forms the invisible foundation for all decision-making, be it personal or collective, at the level of business or social policy. Axiology holds implications across the disciplines: psychology, economics, politics, technology, and ethics. We just heard Philip talk about this. Further, axiology is relevant to one of the main challenges of today. What might be called the dominant value model, which is grounded in economic utility and self-advancement, has faced sustained criticism, while alternative value models vie for position as the most fitting replacement. Before summarizing what I take to be the main philosophical correctives that valuism has to offer, it will be useful to quickly present some core thinkers and schools of thought around value. In the Western philosophical tradition, notable thinkers include Plato, who saw the good as the ultimate reality, his student Aristotle, who saw human flourishing as the highest good, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, of course, thinkers associated with utilitarianism, which finds happiness and pleasure as intrinsically valuable, the giant of Western philosophy, Immanuel Kant, who argued that the only thing good without qualification is a good will, and this is what undergirds human dignity and human rights. And finally, Friedrich Nietzsche, who disrupted the Western tradition by questioning whether traditional values, including truth and morality, serve life or serve instead to suppress life. Moving quickly on to Eastern philosophy, the Confucian tradition finds value in harmony, relationality, and humane conduct. Taoism advocates naturalness and non-coercive action in alignment with the Tao. Buddhist axiology locates ultimate value in liberation from suffering and ignorance. And in the Hindu and Vedantic traditions, the concept of purusharthas, or life goals, including duty, pleasure, prosperity, and liberation, reflect a pluralist approach to value. I should note that world philosophy is not exhausted by that which is conventionally defined as Western and Eastern, but for considerations of time, I have limited my discussion to these areas. Now, regarding the important place and role of human experience and value. Max Scheler and the phenomenologists frame values as a priori. These are objects given to us in feeling. John Dewey and the classical American pragmatists ground value in experience and practice, seeing values as hypotheses tested in action. Value judgments on the pragmatist account are experimental, fallible, and open to correction. This experiential orientation bridges philosophy and applied fields, with implications for policymaking, education, user experience, product design, just to name a few areas that are relevant to this audience in this conference. For the sake of time, it is useful to view value theories along two dimensions: egocentric versus ecological theories and experiential versus structural theories. The main questions are then, does a particular value theory center value at the individual level or within systems? And the second question, does a theory view value as something experienced or as something as a structure independent of human experience? Keeping these questions in mind, we see that with valuism, we have a new model of value, both in terms of its philosophical foundations and the implications it holds for practice across various fields. In my assessment, and I should note this is my assessment, and I'm also still learning about valuism, I see valuism as offering two core philosophical correctives. First, valuism moves from economics back to experience. Under this movement, value is rightly, for experiencing beings like humans, viewed as an emergent quality of lived experience, irreducible to monetary metrics. Second, valuism moves from an egocentric to an ecological standpoint. Under this movement, real value is that which is mutually created in networks, not in some zero-sum competition. Together, these correctives realign value thinking toward human flourishing and systemic resilience. While still in the ideation phase, hence this conference, what becomes clear for me in discussing the philosophy of and around valuism is that valuism applies to every domain where choices matter. Valuism shifts how we measure success and design products, services, organizations, and systems. The complexity and scale of today's challenges make old models of value inadequate. Valuism provides a richer lens. In closing, I will note that while valuism may initially position itself as primarily a diagnostic framework, one that is designed to enrich holistic decision-making, its practical application in fields like business, governance, and education inevitably raises the question of whether it can avoid taking on a more prescriptive role. As with all theories of value, as valuism's principles are refined and operationalized, the boundary between guiding inquiry and dictating norms becomes increasingly porous. So on this very heavy note, I'd like to now hand off the podium to our next speaker, Cole.
Great. So, and Cole, so this truly is a global, we've got both coasts of the United States, we've got Australia and Japan all in action today. So basically, Cole is speaking to us from the West Coast of the United States. So Cole, sorry, you can't see me.
No worries, and I'm going rogue here. I'd love to go without slides because I really view this as a conversation and as a reflection on the prior views also shared. So, Philip, is my time? Am I clear? Am I in my time?
You are clear. You are clear.
Wonderful. Well, it's an absolute honor to be able to be here, and just I want to say thank you so much to be able to engage in this global conversation. So, part of what I want to be able to share and honestly initiate a dialogue toward in our Q&A, moderated Q&A and freeform Q&A is just what are these broader implications of quantifying language? We talk about using these technologies, we talk about identifying, understanding value, but if we take a step back and think about these larger language models, things like this, that use things called word embeddings, right? What does it mean to take value? What does it mean to take the words that we share, that we communicate, that carry value and carry different values, and then turn them into numbers? And the reason why we turn them into numbers is because this information needs to be machine readable, right? So we're feeding these into larger computational models. And so as a result, there needs to be some way for a computer to be able to kind of cogitate and provide output that's useful for us. And so there are pros and there are cons with this. And so I want to be able to speak to that first. A little bit of interesting work on this idea of universal embedding geometry, which is a full mouthful, but I'll explain what does this even mean. And then from there, we might think about what are some stakeholder implications. And I come at this from a strategy lens, part of this being organizations carry out goals and they need to organize in light of who they are or what they're good at, what they're capable of, as well as being cognizant of the broader impacts and the value implications of the decisions that they make. So revealing some of that bias up front in terms of our conversation together. And I think a key strategic insight is that measurement systems are going to make some value visible and other forms of value invisible, right? So you can even think about something in forms of, in terms of attention. So say quarterly earnings, something like this, right? There's an intense focus on the metrics of, what are shareholder returns and things like this, and a little bit more invisibility toward, say, an internal diagnosis of the culture of the organization. So it's not just, or I'll say it this way, our measurement systems direct attention, And they can also marginalize as well, right? So we need to be aware of not only reciprocal value, but our design of measurement is driven by incentives. And so what are these incentives and how can we capture holistic value? And Philip, I'm pretty sure you would be quick to say the goal is not just to be prescriptive. In fact, you say it's non-prescriptive, which is, I think, an evident strength of valuism, which is not to say, well, let's just maximize this for one or the other, for the sake of ethical efficiency. So optimizing for one metric can blind us to other categories of stakeholder value. An example of this, if we think about optimizing one metric, a famous one, US-based, would be, say, focusing on cross-selling at Wells Fargo, right? It's cross-selling, it's cross-selling, it's cross-selling, which involves setting up new customer accounts or new ways to sell other products within the business. And this intense focus on this one metric led to blindness of how customer value was being eroded in other places in the organization. You're just getting me to open up an account, but that's not really what's best for my financial situation, et cetera, at that time. If we think about these language models quantifying meaning, quantifying language, it's a little bit of a misnomer to call large language models language models. Language as in words spoken. It can be any kind of information that's systematic that you want to put in order to train them. It doesn't have to be spoken words. Think about just information itself being carried through. But a key benefit here is that you're able to now, through training these models on all of this information, all of this communication, you can start measuring similarity between things that are said, clustering this information. And why that's powerful and why that's useful for identifying value is the majority of information is unstructured information, 70%, 80%, upwards of 90% for some organizations, unstructured. So not columns and rows, but transcripts, email chains, things like this that aren't as easily put immediately into databases. And so a benefit here is that when you use these sorts of computational tools and technologies, word embeddings, et cetera, this AI approach, even blockchain approaches, you get greater precision, right? Traceability and scalability. And that helps you wrangle or kind of take account of the majority of that unstructured information. Very good. But here's the negative. It flattens meaning. It flattens it because it needs to be machine readable, zeros and ones. You're looking at you're fitting it into a structure to relate these concepts together, okay? But our experiences are plural, they're contextual, they have lived meaning, right? We have lived meaning, and it also can not account for the invisibility of stakeholder perspectives. So that point on marginalization is really important. Now, I foreshadowed a little bit about what do we mean by this idea of embedding geometry. There's a paper by Jia et al. It's a group of computer scientists out of Cornell University, and they came up with a method recently, 2 months ago, called VEC to VEC, VEC, and then the number 2, VEC. And the idea here is that if you have a language model, right, the typical approach is that you're going to train this model to understand a relationship between a bunch of concepts. And what this model, in a way, is doing is assuming a worldview about how things are connected together and even implicitly within that meaning, all right? But you can think about now different models trained on different data. And you think, okay, well, we're over here in one organization and we're over here in another organization. And right then and there, you have different interpretations of meaning and as a result of value, of strategic priority, of impact and these implications. And what's powerful about this idea of this universal embedding geometry is that you can use a method to be able to compare and in a way translate information from large language models trained on different data. You can map them into what's called a similar latent space. So we can think about this in a way of, we now have a sort of Rosetta Stone, if you will, to be able to translate meaning between these local kind of contextual models. And it's a little bit, speaking it from an abstract way, and Philip, I can send you the paper for anyone interested. Please feel welcome to connect. I'll send you that paper. But it's this idea that maybe there's now newer forms coming out to translate value expressed in one system into another system. AI, right, as it's being adopted, these generative tools are becoming increasingly decentralized, increasingly fragmented. And so the vision here is there some way that these systems that are fragmented and will be increasingly fragmented, right, due to privacy, regulatory concerns, can they one day talk with each other? And when we talk about being able to look at the efficiency of exchange and some of the mathematical underpinnings there, getting that kind of translation is incredibly important because in a more practical way, when you're strategizing, it's easy to analyze. It's fairly easy to formulate. And it's incredibly difficult to implement. The reason why it's difficult to implement a strategy is because you really have to take into account the whole of the situation. You have to understand the context, right? And so that's a little bit of a piece there. In terms of the last thing with stakeholder implications, one thing to mention is that meaning is not static. So let's say that we have the best language model in the world. We train it on all of these data, and we get this great mapping of what we think matters for all of our different stakeholders. You've effectively assigned a single numerical value to a certain concept, or to even the meaning of, or the impact for a stakeholder. So I like to think of this as an analogy. You see this mug in front of me. Well, to me, it's on the left side. To you, it's on the right side. And I can kind of see the reflected picture. Maybe it's on the right, but I could turn it. So think about value, right? And the possibility of this idea of plurivocality, holding multiple meanings at the same time. That implies that there's contestation of meaning. There's not just mutual agreement. And so how you resolve that is really difficult. Meaning isn't static, it's dynamic, it's contextual. Models can be diagnostic, but I think a really key thing which could be overlooked here with valuism is that idea that it's not prescriptive. The goal there is not just to give you the answer. You want to be able to take that and bring it into your context as well. So hopefully, kind of from an executive standpoint, you could think about, are there techniques that are emerging that you can apply to allow these different frameworks and technologies to talk with each other, like vec-to-vec, et cetera, and consider how your incentives drive what you measure, and that can make you myopic. And then another point which has really stood out to me was from Jensen Huang, NVIDIA CEO. I was listening in on a conversation with him about a month ago. He mentioned that the new role of strategic leaders, and I'm going to put those in charge and overseeing and impacting the various stakeholders that are affected by organizational actions, a key competency that's emerging is to be a context engineer. Consider, what are you feeding into the model? How are you defining your reality? And then how is that impacting these sort of decision outputs and suggestions and recommendations that you're getting, whether it's an automated technology, whether it's with your board, et cetera. So those are a few thoughts. I'm looking forward to the Q&A, and thank you for the opportunity to share. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much, Cole. So I'm going to try to spotlight all of you at once. It worked yesterday, and somehow now I'm maybe not able. Spotlight, Youquin. Can I keep the spotlight on? Let's see. There we go. It did it. Okay, one more. Yeah, Brian. Somehow I missed you. So anyway, Brian is here with us. So okay, I'm going to stop this just so that we can keep going with the Q&A. Just get ready. I thought I could. There we go. So Brian is here, and so now all I need to do is hopefully spotlight myself, but I can be the quiet person in the background, maybe. Okay, so we have actually introduced a number of, I think, potentially interesting ideas. Great. Thank you, Doina. So basically, my first question is around just, okay, we've got 4 academics talking about value. And basically, what is really in your mind different from the systems that we have in place today? Like, I've gotten questioned online rigorously over the last few days. Philip, why are you making this new word valuism? Like, what is really new or unique about it? So just, I haven't chosen order, so whoever would like to go first, but just in your opinion, what is actually different than the sort of frameworks or systems that we're working inside of right now? So, Youquin, Cole, Brian, anyone want to go first? Cole, you got the mic.
Sure, yeah, I'll be brief with this, but I'll just say, and brief not because it's impactful, it is impactful, but I think this is something that's really stood out to me is how it captures this kind of transparent flow of value. And that non-prescriptive piece, I think, is incredibly powerful, incredibly useful. Oftentimes you'll get at this, say, NASDAQ exchange, right? Or even you go to the whole academic literature and even kind of the different rubrics that are used to assess not just compliance, but how are they doing? What's their ranking? Implied in that is, well, once you do these things, once you check these boxes, these set of arbitrary binary measures, then, okay, now you're good at it. Now you've created sufficient value. And it's either from an executive standpoint, what's called a hygiene factor, which is let's deal with it, but it's never really a positive source of let's propel ourselves toward this. It's a let's deal with this. It could be viewed as a nuisance. So I like how it's moving in terms of even thinking about the flow of value, but then that specifically that non-prescriptive component, I think, is really powerful. And the more we can get this to be contextual, and you talk about blockchain, right? Bring it into context with those different exchanges, I think is incredibly useful. And one last observation I'll make is that I think it's good to push toward the ideal. And it's good also, as we criticize this rigorously and as you build it, to think of where are we currently and where is this a step toward as well, right? This is a journey, this is a path. So those are a couple thoughts.
Great, thank you, Cole.
Okay.
Youquin.
Oh, can I follow? Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Cole. I think it's very good a valid point raising this point kind of question. In my view, valuism differs from existing systems in I think at least the three important ways. And first, I think it clearly compared realized value against potential value. Most existing models, whether utility theory or a stakeholder theory or stakeholder reporting, they only look at what has happened, not what could have been achieved under the same conditions. So that's something valuism kind of can fill the gap. Second, I think valuism integrates the ethics mathematically through the fuzzy moral functions. That means legitimacy is not a simple binary yes or no judgment, but very continuous weighting that captures the nuances across multiple moral dimensions. And third, I think valuism operates at multiple levels simultaneously at the same time, like individual level, like relational level, like organizational level, or even systemic or societal level. This kind of feature makes it possible to track efficiency across different scales and levels and stakeholders in a comparable way and an effective way also. So I think rather than being just another descriptive framework, valuism can give us a diagnostic tool. It makes invisible value more visible and more measurable and more ethically grounded. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Youquin. So Brian, I know you had some information on this already in your presentation, but anything you'd like to add in addition?
Sure. I would just echo what my colleagues have said, and I really think the great promise is in the common language that hopefully is developed and created and utilized across disciplines and industries. Businesses are historically bad about communicating what their value is to their customers and translating that across industries. Different academic disciplines hold different theories of value, as I very quickly went through. I think by bringing it front and center in this new paradigm, if we want to call it that, it kind of forces everyone to come to the table and now come to an agreement on basic terms. It's ambitious, and I hope it succeeds. So,
let me just, if I can add just my comment here on this as well. So you've heard Cole talk about this is not prescriptive. And so again, this idea that value just needs to be measured, right? And we're putting it contextually. So if you've got two companies, Toyota versus Honda, each one has its strategic purpose, its strategic choices. Each one creates or destroys value in its own way. But like we talked about yesterday already too, we can measure and show the differences. And it's not just one number, we can dig into all of those impacts. So this is sort of the bigger picture view. Like this is in a perfect world where we can capture every impact. This is what happens. And then we have to build the path to practically implement to get there. But valuism, what we're trying to present to you today is just basically this bigger context so that we can start to build the systems along to get there. Okay, so that's my personal perspective on that. And so, I'm going to turn over. There was a second question prepared, but I'm going to turn over to audience questions so that we have time. So folks in the chat as well. So I just saw that Cole put the actual article that he was referencing into our chat. We've got one hand going up in the room, and I'm sorry for the people online, the camera is pointed towards the front right now, so you can't see the 40+ people in the room right now behind me, actually in front of me. But Gautam, did you want to make a point or question? So let's just so that the people in the room can hear, just wait for the microphone. And if anyone would like to ask a question through the chat, please feel free to do so. Gautam?
Brian, Youquin, Cole, and I found these presentations incredibly useful. But I think what we really need to do is to go beyond where we've gone and actually start to publish some of this information.
Yes.
So that we get a bigger debate.
Yes.
Going on around the world. That's one. The second thing is that however flawed our measurement system might be, because it's going to evolve over time, over practice, we should actually start to look at one industry jointly and figure out what is the value company A is producing for its stakeholders, whether it's the customer, whether it's community, whether it's ESG, whether it's the employees. And when we start publishing some of this information, there will be a bigger debate, and the bigger debate will make us smarter.
Yes, agreed. So Nakao Sensei has actually been publishing very effectively in Japanese recently. And we are actually, this is part of the process that we're going through to publish these ideas from here. And we should be coming out with a call for a special issue journal. And then Gautam, we can talk also about the journal Creating Value, since I failed last time with the previous special call. But basically, the idea is that from here, from today, we start to spark a discussion. That's point one. Point two, not to steal Kyle's thunder and sort of what's coming in the afternoon session, but we'll be presenting the work that Valuify has been doing to actually model an entire industry. And we're working on 500 to 1,000 companies right now using the value model that I presented in the past, that's been spun out of the Value Research Center, to actually show how we can do this not only for a couple of companies or one industry, but a market. And so we'll be publishing some of that, talking about it actually in the later session, together with our friends from Mainichi News News as well. So anyway, so other comments, questions? Yes, Nicole.
Hi, so coming from a 25-year career in senior management and some more on the practitioner side in high-tech corporations, I've become a little bit cynical over the years on the reports that come out of corporations. By the time it goes through, the initial drafts that we would create, once a month going through PR and legal, it came out with something we read, oh, that sounds great, and then really go, wait, does it actually say anything? So my question is, I'm still learning a lot about them. I'm coming in very, very new to this field, but am I understanding that the goal is to really provide a quantitative way to be able to provide all stakeholders in various, and it's a way to really truly what understand what a corporation, organization, and enterprise is doing, offering, believing, and maybe this is the cynical side. How do we stop it getting into the point of where annual reports are into that today?
Right. So I don't know, do any of my colleagues here want to answer? Because I also can answer this one, but happy to, if anyone wants to jump in, or I'll answer. So if you couldn't hear it clearly too. So basically the quick answer is yes. And please watch the afternoon session where we'll be showing exactly the theme that they'll be talking about is truth from fiction, and starting to map what companies are saying with what actually they're doing. And this is not in terms of trying to show companies are bad, but it's just trying to show action in context. So again, this idea of potential value, if Honda can create this, so value is infinite. Gautam knows this better than anyone, right? So value is infinite. Whatever value you create today, right? I love my wife immensely, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow, that's today was the limit, right? There's always the step forward that I can make. So a company can also create value for its employees or its other stakeholders up to a point today, but that doesn't mean that we can't innovate in ways to do it better tomorrow. And so the idea behind all of this is let's just show it. It's invisible, and you heard many people talking about value and visibility, and so that's actually a topic we talk about in the paper draft that we're writing right now. But this idea that just making externalities not external, making things that have been invisible, visible. And the idea that, again, from an Umwelten perspective, we just haven't had the mechanism to see. It's not that companies are actively, for the most part, actively bad. It's that we haven't, all we have is a legal system to fight against things after the fact. Well, that's actually, the impacts are happening right now. Imagine a future where we can see all of them in real time. That information is openly shared, and we can actually look at companies relative to one another to see, are you really better than your peers or across that industry, like you say, or do you still have some work to do? And let's just give that holistic context. So anyway, John, yes. So folks online, the chat room is quite quiet, so that's okay because the hands are going up inside of the room. Anyway, but please, John, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. You completely spun my brain. But I'm just reflecting on this kind of invisible value, and Cole, the cut for me really did it, because the cut, the potential value is nothing. It's the empty space that the cut describes. And so what I'm curious in terms of, I suppose, building on this idea of potential value and context, and the ability then to not only in real time measure the things that matter, not things that are easiest to measure, but then to start to predict the potential value. And I think that's where it gets really exciting, is when we start to kind of go, well, that empty space of that cup could be coffee, it could be a soup, it could be, you know, whatever it is. But we can start, I imagine, with AI to predict actually all this possible, the new and the unknown.
Yes. Yes.
So how are we going to do that? I don't know, and I don't know whether Panelists have any thoughts on that.
Cole, do you want to answer, or I will turn this around so you can.
Yeah, I'll make. Oh, wonderful. I'll make just a brief comment here, and I think it ties in even to the other comment about PR as well. This is when you start thinking about predicting value. I think one thing that we need to be careful of is that, do we lose then the power of being non-prescriptive with this? But optimistically, because hope springs eternal, I like to be an eternal optimist here. It's a nice way to live. I think here too of maybe there is a changing role in the role of not the legitimizer in chief, but the chief executive officer, the one who's describing and communicating the strategy to the organization, seeing the day-to-day activities, relaying to the board, is with value being transparent mostly, then they can focus more on the decision processes, what's less visible, behind the boundary of the firm, right? So I think that if a system like this takes off, has traction, and changes even kind of the collective analysis or evaluation from a stakeholder lens of these organizations, and then we have to start thinking about different forms and new forms of hopefully more substantive corporate communication. One of my main areas is looking at also impression management research in organizations, so strategic information disclosure, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of that is very performatory. It's not really concrete, it's not substantial. But if you have now a public ledger of these different transactions and actions, you might need to just peek up a little bit of the curtain to show, well, let me justify and explain this, because you want to be able to keep the trust, right? You want to be able to grow and protect your business. Yeah, reputation is often described as a stock. In stocks have inflows and outflows. And so you have to think about, how are you communicating? So I know I'm dancing around to this comment, but I'm looking at it optimistically in this way. But the short answer is, the prediction, I think, is powerful, just like implementation, I think, has the most value in strategy. But then we have to be careful, because now you can start becoming prescriptive. That's the short response.
Great. Brian or Youquin, any comment, Youquin?
Yes, I think, thank you for this. Is exactly where the mathematics becomes very exciting and interesting. And I think you're right. And potential value is not just an empty space. It's a frontier of what we could achieve in a given context. At the moment, we model potential value as ethically achievable maximum under the structural and relational constraints. But the next step, as you suggest, is prediction. With dynamic data such as investment flows, like employee engagements, customer trust, or environmental indicators, we can model how potential value grows or decay over time. And for example, the equation on the slides shows that the potential value in the next period can increase with investments and decrease with neglect. So in principle, valuism can be predictive. It can help organizations or firms see not only where they are now, but what could be realized if resources can be allocated differently, or if ethical choice are made more carefully. So that predictive element, perhaps, as you said, so where the real excitement and interesting stuff will lie. Thank you.
Great. And I unfortunately am going to have to stop this discussion because we have our next panel coming. So I'd like to thank Youquin, Cole, Brian. Thank you for your contribution. Really exciting conversation.